Welcome. I spent decades as a city detective, where every case had a logical solution. My world was built on cold, hard facts, not ghosts or curses. Now retired, I am taking on a new kind of case. The ones people blame on the paranormal. They see phantoms, but I look for facts, because where others see the supernatural, I always find a truth far more chilling. This particular case began when the call came from the regional sheriff, a man whose jurisdiction covered a vast, desolate stretch of wilderness, including a place locals called Whispering Pass. His voice was laced with a palpable tension that was not born of exhaustion, but of genuine fear. "Detective," he said, the words barely audible, "we've got a ghost train, and it ass killing people." Whispering Pass was a remote, hauntingly beautiful mountain region, crisscrossed by the long abandoned tracks of a once thriving railway line. The rail had ceased operation decades ago, a victim of progress, leaving behind a skeletal network of rusty tracks, crumbling tunnels, and treacherous wooden trestles that spanned deep ravines. The local legend was one of profound tragedy, a story so ingrained in the soil that the wind itself seemed to whisper its details. Years ago, a passenger train, packed with travelers and their dreams, was derailed by a sudden, violent rock slide just as it was entering the main tunnel. The locomotive, with its cars still attached, had plummeted into a chasm below, its passengers and crew perishing in the brutal crash. It was said that on certain nights, when the moon was hidden and the mist was thickest, the ghost of that train, with its mournful whistle and the terrified screams of its passengers, would appear on the tracks, condemned to eternally replay its final moments. It was a story for tourists, a chilling piece of local folklore that drew adventure seekers and paranormal enthusiasts alike, all searching for a glimpse of the spectral locomotive. But recently, the folklore had taken a terrifying turn. The ghost train was no longer just a myth. Sightings of a strange, flickering light and the unmistakable sound of a train ass whistle were becoming more frequent and more credible. Witnesses, mostly hikers and adventurous tourists, swore they saw a spectral train, a translucent locomotive wreathed in steam and shadow, rumbling along the tracks. But the real horror began when people started to disappear. To hikers, a young couple vanished after being seen near the old railway tunnel. Then a lone photographer, who had come to capture the beauty of the desolate pass, disappeared after posting a social media message about hearing the train ass whistle. Their bodies were later found deep in the woods, far from the tracks. They had not died in a fall. Their deaths were a result of a direct, deliberate act. This was not a spirit seeking its final resting place. This was a killer, and the terrified locals, convinced that the ghost train was taking new victims to join its eternal journey, were abandoning the pass entirely. The fear was so profound it was almost tangible, a heavy blanket of dread that settled over the entire region. I drove out there, leaving the logical order of the city for a place steeped in irrational fear, where the line between legend and murder had been drawn in blood. The air was thin, cold, and carried the smell of pine and damp earth. The abandoned railway tracks stretched out before me, a lonely, rusting scar across the landscape, disappearing into the dark maw of the tunnel. I listened to the sheriff's account, to the terrified, whispered anecdotes of the few locals who still lived in the area. I heard their stories of the ghost train, but I wasn't looking for spectral engines. I was looking for a pattern and a motive, because a ghost doesn't commit acts of murder and a ghost doesn't use a specific, choreographed routine. My investigation began not with the train as myth, but with the specific details of the sightings and the crime scenes. I noticed that the ghost train was only ever seen at specific times and in specific conditions, always after dusk, in the heavy mist that would often descend upon the pass, and always on the same stretch of track near the entrance to the old, crumbling railway tunnel. The victims, too, were not random. They were all tourists, people who were not from the area, who were alone or in small groups. They were, in essence, easy targets for someone who wanted to commit a crime unnoticed. I then turned my attention to the railway tunnel itself. It was a dark, menacing moor in the side of the mountain, a place of profound silence and deep, unnatural cold. The entrance was crumbling, overgrown with vines and moss, but the tracks leading into it were surprisingly clean, as if they were being used. As I ventured deeper into the tunnel, my flashlight cutting through the absolute darkness, I noticed something the sheriff's deputies had missed. On the walls of the tunnel, there were subtle, almost invisible markings, like chalk lines, spaced at precise, deliberate intervals. And in the dirt of the tunnel floor, there were faint but distinct footprints, not of a person, but of a wheeled vehicle. This was not the work of ghosts. This was the work of people. I had a team of specialists from the mainland, forensic engineers and experts in sound and light technology. We set up an observation post on a nearby ridge, waiting for the dusk to fall and the mist to descend. And when it did, as if on cue, a strange, pulsating light appeared in the distance, followed by the mournful, chilling wail of a train's whistle. It was utterly convincing, but as my team used specialized instruments to analyze the phenomenon, the truth began to emerge. The light wasn't a ghostly train. It was a series of high-intensity, synchronized strobe lights mounted on a silent, remote-controlled drone, or perhaps a hidden trackside vehicle. The lights were programmed to mimic the rhythm of a train's forward motion. The sound was not a ghost's whistle. It was a powerful, directional speaker system, also hidden and remotely controlled, broadcasting a pre-recorded loop of a train's whistle and the screams of a terrified crowd. This was no ancient curse. This was a very modern, very human trap. The ghost train was an illusion, a masterfully crafted ruse designed to lure people into a terrifyingly real trap. The murderers had identified the pass as a perfect hunting ground, and the local legend of the ghost train as the perfect cover. The disappearances were not an act of a spirit. They were the result of unsuspecting victims drawn to the strange light and sound, walking right into a killer's embrace. Here's how it went down. A group of serial killers, driven by a shared, ritualistic motive, had been using the pass for their crimes. They were not driven by greed or vengeance, but by a morbid fascination with the train wreck legend. Their ritual was to reenact the tragedy, to kill their victims in a way that mimicked the horror of the original train crash, believing they were somehow honoring the dead or fulfilling a dark prophecy. The ghost train was an elaborate, cynical tool. They would use the sound and light system to create the illusion of the train, knowing that the locals would stay away and that tourists would be drawn to the strange spectacle. The victims, mesmerized by the illusion, would walk towards the tracks and right into a trap laid by the killers. They would then be taken into the woods and killed, their bodies placed in a way that mimicked the dismemberment of the original train wreck victims. The ghost train wasn't a killer. It was a terrifyingly efficient and utterly cynical serial killer as alibi. My team and I, with the help of the sheriff's department, used the information we had to track down the killers. We found them hiding out in a secluded cave, a sort of macabre shrine to the train wreck, their remote-controlled drone and speaker system hidden in plain sight. They confessed, their stories chillingly revealing the cold, ritualistic logic of their crimes. They had turned a beloved local legend into a weapon, using a ghost story as the perfect cover for a calculated, brutal series of murders. No ghost, just a group of men consumed by a morbid fascination and a very good sound system. So, there you have it. No evil spirits, no curses, just a chilling case of human vengeance. This one showed me how easily a person can turn another's belief into a weapon. They want you to blame a ghost because the truth a man consumed by a grudge is far more terrifying. This case proved that the most dangerous monsters aren't paranormal, but human. Stay sharp.